All right, let's dive into a really fascinating puzzle coming out of the Republic of Tatarstan, a region inside Russia. It's a story about what happens when official laws designed to protect a culture run up against the quiet, personal choices that people make every single day. So here's the mystery at the heart of it all. Ever since the Soviet Union fell, the Tatar language has been a co-official state language in Tatarstan. It's even a mandatory subject in schools. You'd think it would be thriving, right? And yet, researchers started noticing something weird. It was disappearing from the one place where language is supposed to be born, the family home. So why? What's going on? A study back in 2010 gave us our first big clue. It looked at students who identified as ethnically Tatar, and what it found was pretty shocking. A full 30% of them were already speaking mostly Russian with their parents. Now, that is a huge number for a language that's supposed to be making a comeback. So what could possibly be driving this shift? To crack this case, a 2018 study basically went full-on detective mode, using some heavy-duty statistical methods to hunt for the real reasons families were moving toward Russia. And they zeroed in on two main suspects. Suspect number one, family wealth. And we're not just talking about money here. This also includes things like the parents' level of education and their jobs. Suspect number two was city life. You know, the simple difference between living in a small rural town versus a big bustling city. The theory was that the answer to this whole mystery was hiding in one or maybe both of these factors. So the researchers took all this data and crunched the numbers. And what they found? Well, it delivered a very, very clear verdict about what was happening inside Tatar homes. And here it is, the first big reveal. The higher a family's socioeconomic status, the more money and education they had, the less likely their kids were to speak Tatar at home. It wasn't just a hunch. It was a direct, statistically powerful connection. Families with more resources were switching to Russian. And get this. The data shows this link is incredibly strong. For every little bump up in a family's socioeconomic resources, the probability of them speaking Tatar at home dropped by a staggering 27%. This wasn't some minor trend. It was a massive, measurable shift. The second finding was just as stark. Urbanization was a huge deal. Basically, the bigger the city a family lived in, the lower the chances they spoke Tatar at home. The language was holding on strong out in the countryside, but was fading fast in the major urban centers. And this really reflects something the researchers pointed out. There's this social perception that Tatar is kind of a more rural, maybe even provincial language, but in the cities where all the economic and social action is dominated by Russian, well, Russian just takes over. Okay, so we know what's happening, but the real question is why? What's the motive behind all these choices? And it really all comes down to the power dynamic between these two languages. You have to look at the history. For centuries, under the Tsars and then the Soviets, there was this intense push for Russification. Then, after 1991, everything changed. New laws came in, and bam, Tatar became an official language, equal to Russian, at least on paper. But here's the catch. A law can give a language official status, but it can't give it social prestige overnight. So even with all this official protection, Russian is still the language of power and opportunity. It's the language of universities, of the best jobs, of national media. So you have these families, especially the ones who can afford to really think about their kids' futures, making a very pragmatic choice. They see that being fluent in Russian is the ticket to success. But just when you think you've got the story figured out, that families are just choosing opportunity over tradition, the data throws a complete and total curveball. I mean, it's a pretty common sense assumption, right? If a student is totally acing their Russian class, you'd probably figure they're focusing all their energy on the dominant language and, letting their heritage language, Tatar, just fade away. Well, the data says absolutely not. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Okay, you have to hear this twist. It's incredible. For every 1-point improvement in a student's Russian grade, like going from a B to an A, the likelihood they spoke Tatar at home actually increased by 36%. The thinking is that students who are really confident in their Russian skills feel less pressure to practice it at home. That frees them up to just relax and use their mother tongue with their family. So being good at Russian doesn't replace Tatar, it seems to protect it. So when we zoom out, what does all of this mean? What's the real lesson from this whole Tatar language paradox?
Well, this isn't just a story about Tatarstan. It's really a story about this fundamental tension that you can see all over our modern, globalized world. In so many places, communities are trying to navigate this really difficult balance between holding on to the language that defines who they are and embracing the language that offers a better economic future.
And that leaves us with a final, really challenging question. The Tatar language is officially protected, it's funded, it's taught in every school. But if all of that isn't enough to stop it from fading away inside the home, it forces us to ask, what does it truly take? And what is the real price of cultural survival in the world today?